Hi, today we're taking a look at tuples in Python. Tuples are data types that allow the programmer to store multiple items in a single variable. Tuples are different from lists, sets, and dictionaries because the data in a tuple is ordered and unchangeable. They're also written with round brackets or parentheses. So to create a tuple, we're first going to start with our variable name, or the name we want the tuple to have. In this case, the name will just be this tuple, followed by an equal sign, followed by an opening parenthesis, the data, and the closing parenthesis. For this tuple, the data will be apple, banana, and cherry. Basically, these three string values are being assigned to this tuple. So if we print this out, we can see that apple, banana, and cherry are printed in the console. Okay, so just like I said before, tuple items are ordered and unchangeable, but they are also indexed and allow duplicate values. Just like we learned with strings and lists, the first item in a tuple will have an index number of 0, the second item has an index number of 1, and so on. After a tuple has been created, we can't change, add, or remove any of the items in the tuple. To get the number of items in a tuple, we can use the len function. So using the same tuple we made in the previous example, in the print function, we can put the len keyword, and then in a new set of parentheses, we're going to put the name of the tuple, which in this case is this tuple. And this prints out the number 3 since there are 3 items in our tuple. Another important thing to note is that the items in a tuple can be any data type, and you can also mix and match these data types so that a single tuple can contain multiple different data types. For example, let's say that we're making a tuple called tuple1, and we want it to have string, integer, and Boolean values. If we want the values A, B, C, 34, true, 40, and male, and try to print this out, we can see that everything is outputted the way it should be. If you want to access an item in a tuple, you would first put the name of the tuple, and then in a set of square brackets, you would put the index number. So let's go back to the very first example. We have the tuple, this tuple, and it has the values apple, banana, and cherry. And if we want to access the second item, banana, inside the print function, we would put this tuple, since that's the name of the tuple, square brackets, and the number 1, because that's the index number of the second item. And we can see that this prints out the second item, banana. You can also access items using negative indexing, which means that the index numbers start from the end of the data. So the last item would have an index number of -1, the second to last item would be -2, and so on. So if we change this number to -1 instead of 1, it would print out cherry because that's the index number of the last item in the tuple. If we want to access multiple items in a tuple, we can use a range of indexes. Just like strings and lists, remember that the ending index will not be included as one of the values. So let's add a couple more values to this tuple. Orange, kiwi, melon, mango. And in the print function, let's do a starting index of 2, and then a colon, and then an ending index of 5. And remember that the item with an index number of 5 is not going to be included in the range. So this will print out cherry, orange, kiwi to the console because the first item has index 0 and the item at the ending index 5 is not included. If we take out the starting value, the range will automatically start at the first item like this. And if we take out the ending value, the range will go on to the end of the list like this. You can't change the values in a tuple, but let's say that you really needed to change something. You would convert the tuple to a list, change the list, and then convert the list back into a tuple. So let's say we have a tuple called X, and it has the values apple, banana, and cherry. We would cast this tuple as a list like this. So the variable y would basically be the list version of the X tuple. So you would do this like this. We're making a new list variable called y, casting the tuple as a list. And from here, let's say that we want to change the second item to kiwi. So we would be changing the list. So it would be y at index number of 1 because that's the index number of the second item, and that would be kiwi. And we would do it like this, and then we would convert the list back into a tuple. So x equals tuple y. So if we try to print the tuple out, we can see that the value is changed. So it went from apple, banana, cherry to apple, kiwi, cherry. You can also use this changing data type method for adding and removing items. When we create a new tuple, we normally assign values to it. This is called packing a tuple, but we can also unpack a tuple or extract the values back into variables. So this line is an example of packing a tuple, or basically just making a new tuple and adding values to it. That would be this line, that is packing the tuple. Unpacking the tuple So if you would unpack a tuple, it would be like this. Let me delete this real quick. If you wanted to unpack a tuple, it would be like this. Green, yellow, red is equal to fruits. And let's change. And when you're unpacking and packing a tuple, the name of the variable needs to be the same. That's an example of unpacking the tuple. We can see that the name of the tuple is at the end of the line, and each value is replaced with a new variable. So the variable green has the value of apple, the variable yellow has banana, and cherry has red, like that. Another thing to note is that if the number of variables is less than the number of values, you can add an asterisk to the variable name. This means that the values will be assigned to the variable as a list. Just like a list, you can use a for loop to go through the items in a tuple. So let's make a new tuple real quick, and then let's set up our for loop. So let's just change the name of this tuple back into this tuple. Oops, sorry, that was my bad. This tuple. And then let's set up our for loop. So first we would put the keyword for, then the name of the variable in each string item in the tuple, then the keyword in, and then the name of the tuple. And this would all be followed by a colon at the end of the line. And then if we just print out the variable x, we can see that each item in the tuple is printed out. If you want to join multiple tuples together, you can just use the plus sign operator. So let's look at a quick example. Let's say we have a tuple called tuple1, and that has the values a, b, and c. And we have tuple2, and that's going to be 1, 2, and 3. So let's make a third tuple variable that just adds tuple1 and tuple2 together. So tuple3 is going to be tuple1 plus tuple2. And if we print it out, we can see that it's just the values of the first tuple followed by the values in the second tuple. And lastly, you can also multiply tuples together. So if you want to repeat a tuple a set number of times, you can use the times operator. So let's keep the first tuple, and let's make a new tuple called this tuple. That just multiplies tuple1 by 3. And if we print it out, we can see that the items in the tuple1 tuple are just repeated 3 times. And that's it for today. Thank you so much.